The Young Goat and the Wolf. A frisky young goat had been left by the herdsman on a thatched roof of a sheep shelter to keep him away from harm's way. The kid was browsing near the edge of the roof when he spied a wolf and began to jeer at him, making faces and abusing him to his heart's content. "I hear you," said the wolf, "and I haven't the least grudge against you for what you say or do right now. When you're up there, it's the roof talking. It's not you." What's the moral of the story? Don't say anything at any time that you would not say at all times. The Town Mouse and the Country Mouse. A town mouse once visited a relative who lived in the country. For lunch, the country mouse served wheat stalks, roots, and acorns, with a dash of cold water to drink. The town mouse ate very sparingly, nibbling a little of this and a little of that, and by her manner making it very plain that she ate the simple food only to be polite. After the meal, the friends had a long talk, or rather the town mouse talked about her life in the city while the country mouse listened. They then went to bed in a cozy nest in the hedgerow and slept in quiet and comfort until morning. In her sleep, the country mouse dreamed she was a town mouse with all the luxuries and delights of the city life that her friend had described for her. So the next day, when the town mouse asked the country mouse to go home with her to the city, she gladly said yes. When they reached the mansion in which the town mouse lived, they found on the table in the dining room the leavings of a very fine banquet. There were sweet meats and jellies and pastries, delicious cheeses, and indeed the most tempting foods that the mouse can imagine. But just as the country mouse was about to nibble a dainty little bit of pastry, she heard a cat meow loudly and scratch at the door. In great fear, the mice scurried to a hiding place, where they lay quiet still for a long time, hardly daring to breathe. At last, they ventured back to the feast. The door opened suddenly, and in came the servants to clear the table, followed by the house dog. The country mouse stopped in the town mouse's den only long enough to pick up her carpet bag and umbrella. "You may have luxuries that I don't have," she said as she hurried away, "but I prefer my plain food and simple life in the country with the peace and security that go with it." What's the moral of the story? Poverty with security is better than plenty in the midst of fear and uncertainty. The Boy and the Hazelnuts. A boy was given permission to put his hand into a pitcher to get some hazelnuts. When he put his hand in, he took such a great fistful that he couldn't get his hand out again. There he stood, unwilling to give up a single hazelnut, and yet unable to get them all out at once. Vexed and disappointed, he began to cry. "My boy," said his mother, "be satisfied with half the nuts you've taken, and you'll easily get your hand out. Then perhaps you can have some more hazelnuts some other time." What's the moral of the story? don't attempt too much at once. The Tortoise and the Ducks. The tortoise, carries his home on his back. No matter how hard he tries, he cannot leave home. They say that Jupiter punished him so, because he was such a lazy stay-at-home that he would not go to Jupiter's wedding, even when especially invited. After many years, Tortoise began to wish he had gone to that wedding. When he saw how gaily the birds flew about, and how the hare and the chipmunk and all the other animals ran nimbly by, always eager to see everything there was to be seen, the tortoise felt very sad and discontented. He wanted to see the world too, and there he was, with a house on his back and little short legs that could hardly drag him along. One day he met a pair of ducks and told them all his trouble. "We can help you to see the world," said the ducks. "Take hold of this stick with your teeth, and we will carry you far up into the air where you can see the whole countryside. But keep quiet, or you will be sorry." The tortoise was very glad indeed. He seized the stick firmly by his teeth. The two ducks took hold of it, one on each end, and away they sailed up towards the clouds. Just then a crow flew by. He was very much astonished at the strange sight, and cried, "This must surely be the king of tortoises." "Why, certainly," began the tortoise. But as he opened his mouth to say these foolish words, he lost his hold on the stick, and down he fell to the ground, where he was dashed on the rocks. Moral of the story? Foolish curiosity and vanity often lead to misfortune. The young crab and his mother. "Why in the world do you walk sideways like that?" said a mother crab to her son. "You should always walk straight forward with your toes turned out." "Show me how to walk, mother dear," answered the little crab obediently. "I want to learn." So the old crab tried and tried to walk straight forward, but she could only walk sideways, just like her son. And when she wanted to turn her toes out, she tripped and fell on her nose. And what's the moral of the story? Don't tell others how to act unless you can set a good example. Hercules and the Wagoneer. A farmer was driving his wagon along a windy country road after a heavy rain. The horses could hardly drag the load through the deep mud, and at last came to a standstill when one of the wheels sank to the hub into the mud. The farmer climbed down from his seat and stood beside the wagon, looking at it, but without making the least effort to get it out of the mud. All he did was to curse his bad luck and call loudly on Hercules to come to his aid. Then it is said that Hercules really actually appeared, and he said, "Put your shoulder to the wheel, man, and urge your horses. Do you think you can move the wagon by simply looking at it and whining about it? Hercules will not help you unless you make some effort to help yourself." And when the farmer put his shoulder to the wheel and urged the horses, the wagon moved very quickly, and soon the farmer was riding along in great content and with a good lesson learned. What's the moral of the story? Self-help is the first help. Belling the cat. The mice once called a meeting to decide on a plan to free themselves of their enemy, the cat. At least they wished to find some way of knowing when she was coming, so they might have time to run away. Indeed, something had to be done, for they lived in such constant fear of her claws that they hardly dared stir from their dens by night or day. Many plans were discussed, but none of them was thought good enough. At last, a very young mouse got up and said, "I have a plan that seems very simple, but I know will be successful. All we have to do is hang a bell about the cat's neck. When we hear the bell ringing, we will know immediately that our enemy is coming." All the mice were very surprised that they had not thought of such a plan before. But in the midst of rejoicing, an old mouse arose and he said, "I will say the plan of the young mouse is very good. But let me ask one question. Who will hang the bell around the cat's neck?" What's the moral of the story? It is one thing to say that something should be done, but quite a different matter to do it. A dog and a rooster, who were the best of friends, wished very much to see something of the world. So they decided to leave the farmyard and to set out into the world along the road that led to the woods. The two comrades traveled along in the very best of spirits and without meeting any adventure to speak of. At nightfall, the rooster, looking for a place to roost, spied nearby a hollow tree that he thought would do very nicely for the night's lodging. The dog could creep inside and the rooster would fly up on one of the branches. So said, so done. Both slept very comfortably. With a glimmer of dawn, the rooster awoke. For that moment, he forgot just where he was. He thought he was still in the farmyard, where it had been his duty to arouse the household at daybreak. So, standing on his tiptoes, he flapped his wings and crowed lustily. But instead of awakening the farmer, he awakened a fox not far off in the woods. The fox immediately had rosy visions of a very delicious breakfast. Hurrying to the tree where the rooster was roosting, he said very politely, "A hearty welcome to our woods, honored sir. I cannot tell you how glad I am to see you here. I'm quite sure we shall become the closest of friends." "I feel highly flattered, kind sir," replied the rooster slyly. "If you will please go around to the door of my house, at the foot of the tree, my porter will let you in." The hungry but unsuspecting fox went around the tree as he was told, and in a twinkling, the dog had seized him. What's the moral of the story? Those who try to deceive may expect to be paid in kind. There was once a kid whose growing horns made him think he was a grown-up billy goat and able to take care of himself. So one evening, when the flock started home from the pasture and his mother called, the kid paid no heed and kept right on nibbling the tender grass. A little later, when he lifted his head, the flock was gone. He was all alone. The sun was sinking. Long shadows came creeping over the ground. A chilly little wind came creeping with them, making scary noises in the grass. The kid shivered as he thought of the terrible wolf. Then he started wildly over the field, bleating for his mother. But not halfway, near a clump of trees, there was the wolf. The kid knew there was little hope for him. "Please, Mr. Wolf," he said, trembling. "I know you're going to eat me. But first, please, pipe me a tune, for I want to dance and be merry as long as I can." The wolf liked the idea of a little music before eating, so he struck up a merry tune, and the kid leaped and frisked gaily. Meanwhile, the flock was moving slowly homeward. In the still evening air, the wolf's piping carried far. The shepherd dogs pricked up their ears. They recognized the song the wolf sings before a feast, and in a moment they were racing back to the pasture. The wolf's song ended suddenly, and as he ran, with the dogs at his heels, he called himself a fool for turning piper to please a kid. Then he should have stuck to his butcher's trade instead. And what's the moral? Don't let anything turn you from your purpose. The Eagle and the Crow. An eagle, swooping down on powerful wings, seized a lamb in her talons and made off with it to her nest. The crow saw the deed and was silly enough to think that he was big enough and strong enough to do as the eagle had done. So with much rustling of feathers and a fierce air, he came down swiftly on the back of a large ram. When he tried to rise again, he found that he could not get away, for his claws were tangled in the wool. So far was he from carrying away the ram that the ram hardly noticed he was there. The shepherd saw the fluttering crow and at once guessed what had happened. Running up, he caught the bird and clipped its wings. That evening, he gave the crow to his children. "What a funny bird this is," they said, laughing. "What do you call it, father?" "That is a crow, my children. But if you should ask him, he would say that he's an eagle." What's the moral of the story? Don't let your vanity make you overestimate your strength.